The basic tool that defines the relationship between the state and nonprofits, or between the city and nonprofits for that matter, is the contract.
We have an enormous number of nonprofits in the state of New York that really want to do, and I think frequently are doing, a terrific job.
So this is the first time that it has been taken seriously, and there's a concerted effort to have reform, and true reform.
It's an incredible time saver, it's an incredible decrease in paper.
It's especially going to help small organizations which typically don't have lots of contracts.
It will speed up contract renewal, contract execution. There's multi-year contracts involved, so it adds a level of stability. It improves cash flow.
It will make it ultimately easier for any nonprofit that wants to do business with the state.
It's about improving governance and management as well. It's looking at helping nonprofits be stronger so they can carry out their services, fulfill their contract, and be better organizations.
We're hoping that more of those organizations will step up to the plate and apply for state contracts. I think it would be exactly the direction we'd like to see things go.
Are you one of the many thousands of not-for-profit service providers in New York State looking for an easier, faster, and more efficient way to apply for state grants? If you are, then you've come to the right place, because you're about to learn more about an exciting grants reform initiative that will change the way you look at the grants application process. So why is New York State changing the way it processes grants?
We know you often find yourself buried under a mountain of paperwork when dealing with New York State agencies. The barrage of different contract templates. A review process that seems to go on forever. The never-ending requests for supporting documentation. Some of you even think we lose things. It's enough to give anyone a headache.
Okay, we get it. The state bureaucracy is cumbersome. Did you know that under the old system, nearly 75% of contracts were executed late? Well, that's going to change. In fact, it already has. State agencies have already developed a uniform grants contract, a statewide grants management system is well underway, and we're also supporting multi-year contracting. Yes, it's new. Yes, it will require not-for-profit service providers to do a few things a little differently than in the past. But in doing so, it will save your organization time and money, keep you informed on upcoming grant opportunities, and get you paid more promptly. Governor Cuomo is committed to transforming business practices in New York State. He understands that getting not-for-profits on the job quicker serves the people of New York State better. In fact, the governor specifically created a cabinet-level position to oversee the state's relationship with not-for-profits, and grants reform is one of the first of many projects.
As some people may know, I've spent many years as an executive director of a nonprofit organization trying to figure out how to put together state contract requests. So I was really excited when Governor Cuomo asked me to become the state's interagency coordinator for nonprofits, giving me a chance to work on improving this system. This contract reform initiative, which has already gained support from the Human Services Council, the New York State Council on Nonprofits, the Nonprofit Coordinating Committee of New York, and many others, will undoubtedly make it easier for every nonprofit to submit documentation, to apply online, and to manage contracts online. Meaning that nonprofits will be able to track where their grant submission is as it works its way through the state process. Ultimately, we expect that this reform will improve timing on payments, which I know is music to the ears of everyone listening in right now. It also levels the playing field. Even for the smallest nonprofit, it's good to know that you won't need a cast of thousands to apply for a state grant. You may not know it, but there are more than 66,000 nonprofits in New York State, and we want to be in business with all of you.
During this short overview, we'll be discussing the governor's new grants reform initiative, including the master grants contract, multi-year contracting, as well as an area that many of you will find especially helpful, pre-qualification. And with that, it's time to learn a little more about New York State's streamlined grants process. In the past, one of the biggest grant hurdles for not-for-profit service providers was dealing with all the different contract templates that existed among state agencies. With the implementation of the Master Grants Contract, each government agency will now use the same standard form contract, budget pages, and amendments for its state contracts. This in itself is a big change, especially for larger groups who apply to several agencies for support. This bold first step will reduce time, cost, and duplication for New York State as well as our not-for-profit partners. Using standard statewide terms and conditions will also eliminate the redundancy of contract language. The result? A speedier approval process. And because they'll know what to expect, it also helps not-for-profits become more comfortable with the process. Standardization also cuts down on discrepancies and inconsistencies. One way of streamlining the grants process is through multi-year contracts. As part of implementing their 2013-2014 budget, each state agency will now focus on reviewing their grant programs with the goal of moving as many as possible over to a multi-year contract format. In most cases, these contracts will extend over a period of 5 years. This will not only reduce paperwork and processing time for nonprofits, but it'll also go a long way in cutting down on cash flow problems for our not-for-profit partners as well. Another item that's been on our not-for-profits wish list for quite some time now is the ability to use a searchable database to find information about upcoming and available grant opportunities. With the implementation of the Grants Gateway, that wish is now only a keystroke away. Access to the Grant Opportunity Portal is open to anyone interested in finding information about grant funding opportunities with state agencies. The portal is open to the public, and you don't need to register in order to use it. However, if a not-for-profit finds a funding opportunity on the portal and is interested in competing for a grant contract, the not-for-profit must be pre-qualified by New York State in order to submit a proposal. So, what does it actually entail? It all starts with visiting the official Grants Reform website. You'll download a registration form which must be filled out, signed, notarized, and mailed back to the Grants Reform team at the address provided on the website. If you happen to be a vendor who's already engaged with the state, that's great. However, you'll still need to submit a registration form and pre-qualify. But it does mean you'll be one step ahead because an SFS vendor ID number is required to register. This number must be supplied on the registration form itself. If your organization has never worked with New York State and doesn't have an SFS vendor number, you'll need to submit a substitute W-9 form along with your completed registration form, signed and notarized. Once your registration form has been received and approved by the Grants Reform team, your organization will receive a user ID and password. And for new not-for-profit vendors, you'll receive your SFS vendor ID number as well. Now, this is an important step because that user ID and password will allow you to pre-qualify and complete your grantee document vault. This brings us to the pre-qualification process. The pre-qualification questionnaire can be accessed through the Grants Gateway. The first order of business is filling out the pre-qualification questionnaire, which consists of a series of questions that determine your readiness in areas of capacity, legal compliance, and integrity. In the area of capacity, you'll be asked questions that show your organization has appropriate board oversight, a reasonable management structure, as well as the ability to use current technology and communication systems. For the most part, the not-for-profit sector has already demonstrated its strength in the area of capacity, so this is your chance to really shine. Next, in the area of legal compliance, you'll be asked to upload several documents which will be stored in your vault. Finally, you'll find the section on integrity. These questions are quite similar to the ones already used in the vendor responsibility form, so they should be familiar to most of you. You'll also come across a section called service capacity. This is a profile of sorts which in no way is evaluated as part of the pre-qualification process. Rather, it gives us the ability to better understand where our service providers and other groups are located throughout the state and what resources they offer. I know it sounds like a mouthful, but if done correctly, the pre-qualification process shouldn't take more than an hour to complete. Once you've completed the pre-qualification process, all that information is submitted online back to our Grants Reform team. From there, the application is assigned to a state agency and evaluated by one of their pre-qualification specialists. If the document vault is perfect and approved, you'll receive both a system message and a separate email indicating that you've been pre-qualified. This email also includes a pre-qualification ID number. More about that in a moment. So what happens if a group doesn't meet the pre-qualification requirements the first time around? Not to worry, because the pre-qualification specialist assigned to review your application will highlight the areas in your application that require further explanation or more documentation before the review is complete. This gives you a chance to clean up all the loose ends before submitting a bid for a state contract. Your trained pre-qualification specialist will continue to review your file and check your responses until it's complete. Now back to the pre-qualification number. Your pre-Q number lets a state agency know that you've been pre-qualified and that all of the preliminary paperwork requested for pre-qualification already exists in the data vault. The best part is that once you're pre-qualified, it's good for 3 years. Can you imagine filling out and submitting this basic information once? With the storage of this information in the data vault, all state agencies will now have access to your information. Talk about a time saver. And yes, the information is confidential and secure. We've made sure that it's not available to the public. But it can be readily accessed by state agencies who want to review your documents when considering you for grants contracts. The pre-qualification process is essential to the success of this system. In fact, as of July 31st, 2013, all not-for-profit vendors will be required to pre-qualify prior to their participation in a competitive bid process and execution of contracts, or prior to being considered for a contract amendment or modification. The bottom line? New York State wants everyone who is eligible to apply and to be accepted.
So my advice to nonprofits is to be patient and don't panic. As this major initiative is rolled out and tested, you will see changes and improvements. But many of these improvements will be a direct result of your feedback. So what can you do to prepare for this change? Educate your board, educate your management and staff about what's happening, and talk to your peers about their experiences and the best way to do things. Reach out to state associations for technical assistance and training. And once you begin using the system, visit the Grants Gateway often. The information there is continually updated and available to all of you. Our primary goal here is to transform the working relationship between New York State and the nonprofit community. And contract reform is the first major step in that direction.
So there you have it, a streamlined grants process that better serves the people of New York State. Detailed information covering all of the processes we discussed in this brief overview can be found at www.grantsreform.ny.gov. Governor Cuomo wants you to know how much he appreciates and fully recognizes the importance of the not-for-profit community and your service throughout the state. And this is why he's initiated these sweeping reforms to the statewide grants process. Again, thanks for watching and for everything you do as organizations and individuals for the state of New York.